Okay, good evening. My name is Michael Watkins, and I am chair of the Advisory Redistricting Commission, and I represent District 2. Welcome to the special meeting and workshop on redistricting. I'd like to introduce our commissioners. Commissioner O'Neill, you there?
Yes.
Well, Commissioner Reyes.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see everyone.
Hello, Chris. Commissioner Radden.
Here.
Okay. And Commissioner Motion.
I'm here.
Welcome, commissioners. Now I turn it over to staff to conduct the meeting, the workshop. Alyssa?
Great, thank you. My name is Lisa Benson. I am Assistant CEO and I am part of the redistricting team. And we want to welcome everyone who's here in the room with us, as well as members of the public and our commissioners, to our special meeting and public workshop on our 2021 redistricting process. Tonight's sort of event is going to have a series of presentations, but then really the opportunity for any of the public joining us on Zoom. And we have several staff folks and a couple people here in the audience, but to then really start talking more about communities of interest. We don't want it to be just us talking. We really want to have the opportunity for listening. So that's our goal tonight. With that, I am going to pass it over to Rita Sanchez, who is our lead for this project, and she'll be walking us through our redistricting basics presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me take a moment to share my screen. If I can get a thumbs up that you see the presentation titled Supervisorial Redistricting 2021.
Yes, we do.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us. This is our second public workshop. My name is Rita Sanchez. I'm with the County Administrative Office and I'm part of the redistricting team. Before I start, Elisa, is it okay for me to start on redistricting basics, or did you want to do staff presentations?
Oh, I think we're going to do that. Well, I have
get right in it.
That's the first staff presentation.
I'm sorry, you got a little bit cut off.
Oh, you do. Oh, thank you. Ruby just told me we need to do the rest of our staff introduction.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing. My apologies. I jumped ahead. So Rita Sanchez with the County Administrative Office.
Hello, I'm Ruby Marquez. I'm the Chief Assistant County Counsel and I'm the legal advisor to the Commission.
Susan?
I'm Susan Perlman, working with the County Administrative Office on the redistricting project.
Yeah.
I'm Matt Price. I'm the GIS manager for the county.
And we have Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jenny, and I'm also with Santa Cruz County GIS.
Okay, I think, is there anyone else who needs to share their, go ahead.
I'm Gina Lapioli and I'm with the elections and I'll do them now.
Right, okay, and thank you, Rita, for getting me back on script. And we'll move right to the redistricting presentation or redistricting basics.
Okay, perfect. Here we go. So in this presentation, I'll be going over the basics of redistricting, the role of the Advisory Commission in this process. I'll mention a little bit about the laws governing redistricting. And after that bit of background information, I'll be talking about communities of interest, and I'll give you a bit of a timeline for the rest of our redistricting process work. Okay, so the purpose of these public workshops is to inform the public on current redistricting efforts and gain public input. We have 2 additional public workshops scheduled, one in North County at the Felton Branch Library. That will be next week on September 29th, same time, 6:30. And then another one in South County at Starlight Elementary in Watsonville. That'll be September 30th at 6:30. Those workshops, like this one, will be a little bit more region focused, but you are welcome to participate in any of these public workshops in person or virtually. So what is redistricting and why does it matter? So redistricting usually happens every 10 years after the release of the decennial census. The census provides a lot of information on who our community is and how it has changed in the past 10 years. As communities change, existing districts need to be adjusted so that each district is substantially equal in population and ensure that each board member represents about the same number of constituents. Your participation today in the redistricting process matters because it helps determine which neighborhoods and communities should be grouped together into a district for purposes of electing a board member. And it also ensures that more communities have a better opportunity to elect candidates of their choice and voice their specific needs and interests. So a little bit about the Advisory Redistricting Commission. The County of Santa Cruz is made up of 5 supervisorial districts, each with an elected representative, making up our Board of Supervisors. And on February 23rd of this year, the Board of Supervisors established the Advisory Redistricting Commission to guide redistricting efforts, and soon after appointed a community member of each district to serve on that commission. The role of the commission is to conduct public outreach through informational sessions and workshops like today's to encourage public participation. The commission serves as the eyes and ears of the supervisors to hear public comment from the community and help identify and define our neighborhoods and communities of interest. Ultimately, they will recommend changes in district boundaries to be considered by the board in its approval of updated supervisorial boundaries. And by everyone's participation today, you are providing the commissioners with the input that they need to consider when they begin drafting their recommended changes. Along with public input, they will also be considering state and federal legislature as they do their redistricting work. Under Assembly Bill 849 and Election Code 21500, supervisorial districts must be drawn under the following order of priority. Supervisorial districts must be of nearly equal population. Supervisorial districts must comply with the Voting Rights Acts to ensure that minorities have a fair opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. To the extent practicable, supervisorial lines must be drawn contiguously, which means they share a common border. Supervisorial districts must minimize the division of cities, neighborhoods, or communities of interest to the extent possible. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that in future items. Districts must minimize divisions of cities or census designated places. Boundaries must be easily identifiable and understandable. And this can be achieved by utilizing natural and artificial barriers, streets, or county boundary lines. Districts must be geographically compact to the extent possible. And to the extent possible, districts must not favor or discriminate against any political party. So this very clear criteria makes up the marching orders for the commission as they do their work. So now that I've given you a quick, brief background information, I'll move over to communities of interest. So as you saw in the previous slide, communities of interest is fairly high in the order of priority when drawing district lines. Like I said, there's very clear legislative guidelines and criteria as far as engaging communities of interest and what communities of interest are. So a definition of communities of interest is a concentrated population that shares common social and economic interests that should be included in a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. Some examples include areas in which people share similar living standards, have similar cultures, use the same transportation facilities, have similar work opportunities, or have access to the same media. It can also be a group of people with a common cause or path. Though we do have a legal definition of communities of interest, it is up to those who live in or work in the community to identify and establish the interest that unites them. So as we think more about communities of interest, it's very true that people can belong to multiple communities of interest. And as you think about your community of interest, think about what brings you together and is important for your community. You can begin by thinking about your street, your neighborhood. What are the boundaries? Where does your community start and end? What issues do you or your neighbors care about? And how does influencing maps help your cause? So a little later in the agenda, you'll have the opportunity to think more about these questions and tell us about your community of interest. And now for my last slide, I'll talk briefly about the redistricting timeline. We began our access and outreach phase around July with the launch of our redistricting website. On the website, we update all types of information, and we have a community of interest tool where you can describe your community of interest and map it as well. And we've done several outreach efforts through social media, email blasts to different community organizations. Our current efforts are focused around involving and engaging the community in redistricting through these public education and community of interest workshops. Though our last public workshops are next week, the community can continue to participate by completing community of interest forms and maps online. Additionally, we'll be having a mapping tool available in the next couple of weeks for the public to actually draw and submit maps. And you'll be hearing more about this and the 2020 census data in the next presentation. The mapping tool will also be available for use by the Advisory Redistricting Commission, who will be working on drafting maps and plans now that the official 2020 census data has been released. The Board of Supervisors will consider these draft maps and plans and receive public testimony at public hearings scheduled for October 26th and November 9th. And a final public hearing is scheduled for November 16th with the objective of having the board adopt a final map. Our legal deadline for final map adoption is December 15th. And that's it for my presentation. We are very excited to have you all participating in supervisorial redistricting efforts and want to take this moment to encourage you all to participate in other redistricting efforts that are taking place throughout the county. And with that, I will now hand it over to our geographic information team to talk more about the redistricting software available and the census data.
Good evening. Let me share my screen. Okay. Thank you for all for taking the time to participate in the county supervisorial redistricting. My name is Jenny Gomez, and tonight I will be presenting on agenda item 3B, which includes the mapping software and other resources for redistricting. So these resources include the Community of Interest web app that consists of a form and an interactive map, the census data that we will use for redistricting, the Esri Redistricting software that will simplify and automate the creation of redistricting plans, and finally links to other helpful resources. Our redistricting website has a Community of Interest tab where you can access a form that will allow you to create and describe your community of interest. The way you do that is by entering your name, address, phone number, and email, and then you give your community a name. After you've done that, you fill in the part under Tell Us About Your Community. And these would be the qualities and characteristics that make your community unique and cohesive. This can include, for example, the local schools, parks, libraries, and other things that are shared by the people in your community. And then in the Tell Us About Your Community place, or Tell Us About Your Place, you can describe the boundaries of your community and why adjacent areas maybe should not be included and what distinguishes them from your community. Last, in the more about your story, you can add anything that wasn't covered. After that, you have the opportunity to draw your community of interest. So mapping your community of interest on the map, you'll find this web map that's not unlike many you've probably already seen. You have your zoom in and zoom out tools. You can enter your address to help you more quickly locate the area of your community of interest. You have the home button that will basically just zoom you back out to the original extent of the county. And then below that is the large map button. And that one's really helpful. So when you're getting ready to draw your community of interest, you can click on that and it'll basically pop the map out and make it bigger. So it'll be easier for you to draw. And then in the upper right, you have the base map. And that one will allow you to choose a variety of different base maps that will help you draw your boundaries, such as aerial imagery and other street layers. And then below the base map is the Start Drawing tool. So you can click on that, and then you can just use your mouse and hover over the map and start clicking away and drawing the boundaries of your community of interest. When you're done, you can either double click or you can click that check mark button below for finish. And then there's also undo, redo, reset. And if you aren't happy with your drawing and you want to cancel it and start again, there's the cancel button. So again, when you're done drawing, just click the check mark or double click to finish your sketch. And after that, the edit tool will become active, and that's the little pencil that you see in the circle. So that'll allow you to make adjustments to the boundary. When you click on that, all the places where you clicked your mouse will become little circles, and you can scoot them around and adjust them to refine your community of interest boundaries. So when you're done, you click the finish, and then the submit, the blue button at the bottom of the map. Then your info that you entered will be fed into the online community of interest map. It's not going to show any of your personally identifying information. There it is. It won't have your phone number or your name or anything. It'll just have the name of your community and the descriptive information that you've entered. This application shows all of the community of interests that have been submitted to date. And if you want, you can go ahead and look at this and review the other communities of interest before submitting your own. The census geography that we're going to be working with is the census block level, which is the smallest and most detailed level. As you can see from this diagram, it's the smallest one down at the bottom, and it's basically the building block of all the other geographic areas. All the larger areas are pretty much aggregates of the census blocks. And then the map on the right is a detail of the census block data. The white lines show the block boundaries, and the top number is the block number, and the number below that is the total population for that block. So the data for redistricting, we've got a lot of data. We've got the 2020 Census State Redistricting data. It's also known as the public law or the PL 94-171 summary file. And in addition to total population, it also has data on race. It has race by Hispanic and non-Hispanic. It has race for 18 years and over. And then it has race 18 years and over, Hispanic or Latino, and not Hispanic or Latino. And then it also contains group quarters population by type and housing occupancy status. So the other sources of data that we're going to use besides the PL 94-171 are the communities of interest from the forms and the data that people are submitting that we just saw, the jurisdictional boundaries such as cities, census designated places, fire districts, water districts, school districts, and so forth. There's also the voter registration and statement of vote by 2020 census blocks, and the citizen voting age population by 2020 census block. And those are both from the statewide database. And so the ESI, or the Esri Redistricting software, this is a user-friendly web mapping-based tool that allows anyone to create and share a regulation-compliant redistricting plan. Both the Commission and the public will use this to develop their redistricting plans, as well as to create reports and maps on their plans. So the way that you use it is to first create a plan, and you can either start from scratch or modify an existing plan by following a step-by-step process that the software will guide you through. Then you can generate reports using either predefined templates, or you can create custom reports by, again, following a user-friendly step-by-step process. And in a similar way, you can also create and share maps that will help communicate your plan. And this is a screenshot of what the software looks like. You can see it's very map-centric with the census information in the table below. And as you change or reassign the blocks to different supervisor districts, the totals automatically change below. So you see you have the total numbers for the various categories, as well as the percentages, and it's all updated on the fly. So, as you change, one block from one district to another. And finally, we have our helpful links. So that first one is the link to the Communities of Interest form. And I hope you'll all use that one to create and submit your community of interest. We have the statewide database link, and there's a lot more information on the reapportioning of the census data and the voter registration and voting age data. And then we have the Esri Redistricting solution links. So the first one is would give you a good overview on the software. And then the second one is a link to a variety of short demonstration videos. I think there was 30 on there, and last time I checked, and they all help you show you how to do different things with the software, and they're very short. They're only a couple minutes, most of them. So with that, I would like to thank you again for your participation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Matt for agenda item 3C.
Can I interrupt for one moment? I just want to share with members of the public, either here in the room or on Zoom with us, that we will be taking public comment on the staff of item 3 at the end of the staff presentations. So just wanted to let, if anyone has their hand up or has a question, we will have time for that when we finish the staff presentations. Sorry, Matt.
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, hello, my name is Matt, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about item 3C. And it's basically the statewide database released the reallocated census data, which includes the process that they went through to take the California prison population and reassign it back to their last known address. And so the original census data was released in late August. And it took the statewide database about a month to get that data processed. We got our hands on it yesterday. We put this table together and fed it into our GIS system that's separate from the Esri software that you saw Jenny give the presentation on. And you can kind of see how the numbers are. The districts, currently none of them are greater than 5% in terms of the over under, in terms of just looking at target population, which is what we're kind of focusing on now. So what we're trying to do, we're working with Esri, our software vendor. They're obviously under a lot of pressure and time constraints to get this data loaded into the system and make it available for the public and the Advisory Redistricting Commission to have access to the tools. We are hoping, the last email that I got from them was that they have the data loaded and they're doing their testing, and they're hoping by the 24th that they're going to be able to start rolling that out to their customers. And then we tentatively had the week of 27th. We were hoping earlier in the week for the training, but it looks like we might need to push that forward a little bit, a few days. I'm still trying to get communication with Esri on that. They're they haven't been too responsive. So they've been pretty busy. And at this point, we wanted to provide the opportunity for the commissioners to ask any questions or engage in a discussion about the data. If there's anything else that I can offer, if there's commissioners that would like to explore different configurations, I would be available. You can contact me through my email. We can set up a time to do a Teams meeting. I have access to some other software that would allow us to, if you have some preliminary ideas, to get you some counts and things like that. We are going to try to hold off to do any of the kind of official work until we get the official data loaded into the software. The numbers, the adjustment that we wound up getting was only 492 people added to our county. So it was very slight. It was almost evenly distributed. So the impacts are minimal. But when you're trying to keep track of the math and the math, it's good if we could start from the official data. But that doesn't mean that over the next week, if any of the commissioners want to reach out to me, you have some questions, I can run some numbers on areas that you might want to take a look at. It'll be really close. So that's where all I have really to say on it.
Great, thank you, Matt. So really, before we take comments or questions from the public, this is the first time our commissioners have the opportunity in one of our special meetings to have a conversation about the data and what we see in terms of the ins and the ins and the outs. So we wanted to give the commissioners the opportunity to almost have more of a conversation with each other, to the extent that that is what you guys want to do today in terms of your observations or surprises or just any thoughts as we now see the data that we're working with. So with that, I'm going to sort of ask you, Chair Watkins, to sort of check in with your colleagues and see
Sure.
any questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Listen. Why don't we ask Commissioner O'Neill, any question? What do you think of the data?
I'm looking at the map and it's interesting. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of changes for me, but for District 1. But I do see some of the places that once we get the map software, it will be fun, a little bit of fun to play with. And I can see what boundaries will probably have some adjustments. But I don't have any questions.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. Commissioner Reyes.
Hi, everybody. I just have a question. I'm not sure who the right staff person is to answer it. I've heard a couple people in the community speculate that the 3rd district data has not changed enough to warrant any changes to that district. I'm a little skeptical of that point of view. Can somebody from staff speak to that? I mean, it looks to me like the data for the 3rd district does warrant a little bit of a change. And I'm just curious if those that know the data better than I and have had more time to dig through it have a thought on that.
Do you want to take it? So you go first, Matt, and then I can.
Oh, sure, I'm happy
give
to.
you my perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Matt again. Now, when you look at the numbers, it was really amazing how close we came in under that 5% target. You know, we're pretty lucky. But if you're looking at it from just truly trying to balance out the districts, if you look at the 3rd district, it's about 2,000 above the target, and the 5th district is about 2,000 below. But they're still within the 5% range. But if you were trying to get all the numbers under 1%, then that would be kind of where you'd be looking at the adjustment. If that's your sole criteria for looking at any changes.
So I'm going to step in on that part, which is, as we know, the meeting being 1%, 5%, whatever is not actually our guiding criteria. And it really does come back to that ranked order of criteria that Rita walked through. And the idea for the commissioners is, yes, we may be within that. Are these boundaries still represent the communities of interest? So that's really going to be the question for you all. And if you go through that analysis and that feedback we hear from community, and you say, yes, the communities of interest and all of those ranked criteria are still served by the boundaries as drafted, that could be one of the plans you put forward to the board for consideration. But that, I think there also may be, you may hear from our members of the public that a community of interest is divided by that current boundary, and you may want to consider some changes accordingly. So, I think in particular, Chris, since we were starting this after, our Fair Maps Act legislation, it is different from past processes in terms of the expectation that stacked level of criteria are considered just as much as the balancing factor. Is that helpful, Chris?
Yes, I do have a quick follow-up question to that. Recognizing that the criteria that's provided is the guiding principles of how we would do this, and assuming that we do right by the various communities of interest, I'm curious if we were to leave the boundaries of the 3rd and 5th district alone this year, because the numbers maybe don't warrant it and we wouldn't be negatively impacting communities of interest. Does that set us up 10 years down the road to have a much more substantive redrawing of the lines if we don't redraw them this time? Or is it just too hard to know how the numbers will change 10 years from now if we weren't to do anything this round?
Well, I think you answered the question in your follow-up question. I mean, understanding how our population shifts and changes in the next decade, I think we don't know if it will be so significant to require a balancing set of redesign. Again, I think it comes back to this commission understanding what communities of interest look like today, and those questions of natural boundaries. Does this all still make sense? And again, applying that to where we are, and it may be you decide that you are going to change District 5 in a certain way to reflect a community of interest that's not reflected today, and that then has you may say, well, that does have implications somewhere else. But I do think it's hard to predict what it will mean in a decade. I will just say for myself, we're really coming out of the pandemic and how we're seeing the effects of remote working environments. People may live in very different places in 10 years. So we could see dramatically different data. And gosh, maybe we can cross our fingers and think the best thoughts, and maybe we'll get some resolution to some of our housing affordability questions here, and that changes the dynamic. So I do think it's hard to really, anticipate what will happen in the next decade. And really, it just comes back to what are the communities of interest and the thoughts of our community members today, and the boundaries align with those.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's helpful. I do actually have one more question, if it's okay, Michael.
Sure.
I've also heard members of the public, just in conversations I've had in passing with folks who are interested about this, speculate that the 3rd district's numbers are artificially low because students were gone for much of 2020. And therefore the numbers are artificially low because students were dispersed due to COVID and therefore not counted. Is there any validity to that? Or do we just have to accept the numbers as they are?
I think we do have to accept the numbers as they are. And I will double check this, Chris, and get this answer back to the commission. But the way they went about doing the student count, and they usually do a particular sample day, and I don't know what the name of the term is, where it's like basically folks living in group situations get counted a certain way on that day. And that day did occur after many people who particularly were living on campus were sent home. However, I think there was also follow-up then with students when they were to report their own census status, to report their school address as their census address, not their return to home address. Does that mean that all happened? I think as a mother of 2 college-age people, not consistently. However, that we deal with the data as given by the Census Bureau, and it's not really our role to question the methodology.
Does that work, Chris?
Yes, thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay. Commissioner Radden.
Yes, thank you. In terms of my just general impressions and comments based on the numbers that we've just seen, I wanted to say that I was surprised by the relatively flat population figures countywide over the last 10 years between the 2010 census and the 2020 census. My expectation was that there'd be more robust growth in the county than what we've seen. But as it's turned out, the 10-year change has been very modest, if not, negligible. And then the second observation I have is that I look at the district that I represent, which is District 4, and then look back on the decades-long pattern that's been in place. And that is that the South County population has become increasingly more dense as compared to the population changes in the rest of the county. And we see that that trend has not taken effect over the last 10 years, so that the density numbers aren't all that different than where they were 10 years ago. I was actually expecting that, that was my subjective opinion, if not a guess, but it, I think, defied what other people were predicting, which was that the ongoing trend of more density in the South County would continue, but that hasn't been the case, as borne out by the numbers. And so those are the two general observations that I have, and we work with the numbers. There's some allure to the concept of saying, well, why don't we just kick the can down the road for 10 years? Because these changes have been so minor, especially as between districts. And of course, that's not something that we're authorized to do. I mean, our job is to deal with the here and now and the census that came in 2020 and to try to, read the crystal ball about what's going to happen over the next 10 years is really not our job. And I doubt we'd be very successful at it. So we work around the numbers that we have. And if it turns out that things don't change, we'll have to show our work like a math problem. It's not enough to say, well, let's just adopt the districts that existed 10 years ago. If that is the eventuality, it's because we've gone painstakingly through the statutory steps, those that are codified in the legislation that was adopted in the interim between the 2010 process and the current process. And so looking forward to rolling up our sleeves and doing that. And so I think that I will conclude my filibuster.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Radden. Commissioner Motion.
Yes, well, I have many of the same observations about surprised that the data has been so stable. I did go back and look at the actual statute about the criteria that the state has set out, and I noted it's mentioned in a couple of the staff slides that for both the communities of interest and for maintaining the state, the city, and other local jurisdiction boundaries, we're charged to do that to the extent that it's practicable. And I'm just, I'd be interested in hearing from the staff if there's any kind of definition to that. I am a retired attorney, and it strikes me that that is a very loosey-goosey kind of standard to what is practical and what isn't practical. And here's my concern. My concern is that our timeline is so short that if we make any major changes, then the folks who are affected aren't going to have time to express their concerns. I'm very interested in hearing what the public has to say tonight. I want to be at all these meetings so I can hear the public and see whether there's kind of a groundswell for some changes that we hear. But again, I think we just need to be cautious because we have a very short timeline. We're going to put out a couple of plans and there won't be time for the public to really react to it. And my sense from my own conversations with many people here in the 5th District is, well, I don't need to participate in this process because I'm in the 5th District and I'm happy with it. So if there are folks who then find out, oh, wait, we've been shifted to the 3rd District, that may affect, they may have they may be working on some issues with the 3rd District supervisor. They may not see their community of interest as being adequately protected, but they won't have a chance to respond to that. So I think there's a practical problem with the timeline in terms of trying to make any major changes. And I think we just need to be cautious, be responsive to what we hear from the public, but also recognize that because of the short time, it may be that we inadvertently upset people who feel like their communities of interest have not been adequately protected because they've been moved.
Before we go to public comment, do you have any recommendations, Commissioner Mosier, on trying to truncate those timelines or try to expand those to ensure that everyone has a voice?
I don't know if Commissioner Mosier understood that as directed as a question.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, I've looked at the timeline. It looks like we would have very limited time at best. Maybe we could extend it a little bit. But I think my main comment is having to do with just being cautious about making major changes. If we hear, and again, I think the public input is very important for us to see around the edges. But my question, I guess, is, has the staff looked into it all? Any kinds of standards that would help guide us in terms of this, what is practical or not, which is what the statutory language says.
I think Ruby, our legal protector here, have a little bit. I also want to share a little bit about the staff conversation around this question, around cities, the division or unification of cities. Because we did have some conversations about that past set of decisions and the fact that that is our normal today. Do you want me to talk about that, or do you want to speak to anything about Commissioner Mosier's?
Sure, I'll answer that question first.
Okay.
Well, I have to say, Commissioner Mosier and Commissioner Radin, your comments make my heart sing, because exactly. To answer your question more specifically, Commissioner Mosier, about the legislation, it is true. All four, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of Section 21500 about the supervisory districts and the authority, all of them start with "to the extent practical." So it's, to the extent practical, to the extent practical. I highlighted it in my book there. But we just don't know. I think it might be more of a subjective standard. We just don't have any we don't have any lawsuits around it or any case law to guide us, because this law just passed in 2016 or 2017, I believe, with some more recent amendments. So we just don't have any guidance from the court. I think as Commissioner Radin said, as long as we're showing our work and showing that we were to the extent practical, however we interpreted that, and have community input, that we were able to adhere to those that criteria. So it's a little bit of an unknown there.
So what I would just like to add is, we were talking a little bit about, in particular, the division of Scotts Valley and when that decision was made. And I'm gonna look at Susan, since she was our standard person who's been doing this for the longest time. And my understanding is, when those that approach was considered, part of the thinking behind it was actually that every city had representation by 2 supervisors. So it was intentional in the idea that it wasn't just, the interests of a city was only represented by 1 person, but that actually you had 2 folks that had some responsibility for representing a community of interest defined by a city on the board. That was an explicit choice in how those boundaries were drawn. Now, am I speaking to that correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
So that to put that into context, that when we've talked a little bit about that internally, so if that's a policy decision that we feel, actually serves a representation outcome for our community, that's a reasonable thing to stand with this go around as well, that we don't need to now suddenly say, well, this is what other folks are saying, is the right way to represent a city, if we think that actually makes sense. And then to your point, Commissioner Mosier, that if no one's clamoring for a change, and then we just said, we're changing it because we read that, cities shouldn't be divided, that actually is sort of antithetical to the idea of where we're getting in terms of more representation as opposed to less.
And I'll just add that it could be now that our current districts see themselves as a community of interest. We over the last 10 years, it could just be that area up in your District 5 area has now had a sense shared of District 5-ness. So that itself could be a community of interest.
But I agree, if there was a decision to put forward a very dramatic change like that, and we did not have sufficient opportunity for folks to comment on it, that could be problematic. The way we are planning the public hearings, with this body's recommendation to the board going forth on October 26th, then there's space before the second public hearing of the board on November 9th. Am I right? And then the final hearing on the 16th. We do have some space in there for, for public comment on any of the plans. And if there was a decision that we thought there was a lot of energy and a reason to extend the public comment period beyond that, the board could take up action even later in November or in December. So we do have space should we realize that more public comment and public involvement in the final mapping decisions is warranted.
It's interesting. It's really hard for people to sort of maybe get excited about things until the map drafts are sort of out there and circulating, right? And so there may be a sudden wave of interest once the maps are generated for review by the public. And at this point, it's all sort of very conceptual. And so our job, again, is to continue the outreach, it seems to me. And then people are sort of aware of the process, even if they put it on their back burner. And then if the maps come out and there's angst about particular decisions that the maps reflect, then people hopefully will have a chance to comment and will come out and state their case. I'm wondering, with regard to the historical notes that you made about wanting to divide cities between two supervisors, was part of that process also a desire that no supervisor would have a district that was entirely incorporated within a city, so that each of the 5 supervisors would have responsibility for an unincorporated section of the county?
I'm going to have to look at our living historian here.
I don't recall that conversation was not had in the public. I don't recall that conversation came up in the hearing.
Okay. All right, that's sufficient, Peter?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Why don't we take public comment now on item number 3? Staff presentations, any public comment?
Yes, we do have members of the public wishing to speak. Just as a reminder for folks joining online, if you want to provide public comment, please use the raise hand feature. I will call you by name and allow you to unmute yourself. Vera, if you could unmute yourself. Go ahead, we hear you.
We can't hear her, Rita.
Vera, it looks like you're unmuted.
Want to come back to Vera and go to the next person?
Okay, let's see. That's it for public comment for anyone joining us online. If there's someone in person.
We looked around the room and everyone seems okay. So I don't think there's any additional public comment or questions from the community room.
Well, let's go back to Vera. Are you on, Vera?
Vera is still on, but she lowered her hand.
Okay, okay. Well, let's move on to item number 4, community of interest.
Oh, one moment. It looks like she raised her hand again. Let's see if we can allow her to talk.
Rita, we were just suggesting if Rita, if Vera needs to write a question in the chat, that might be another option if the speaking and muting part is not working out this evening.
Okay. Well, she can always address us in public comment if need be. Why don't we move on to item number 4, communities of interest exercise?
Okay, we're going to have give a little bit of a walkthrough on communities of interest and a little bit of an exercise.
Thank you. As Rita described in her presentation, and as the California Constitution defines a community of interest, they say it's a population which shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. We talked about some examples of communities, those that are common to an urban area versus a rural area, an industrial area, or an agricultural area. Those common to areas in which people share some similar living standards, use the same transportation facilities, have similar work opportunities, or have access to the same methods of communication relative to the election process. Cultural communities can also be communities of interest. Really, the only thing not in the community of interest for redistricting are the relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. So you can see that communities of interest are self-defined and they create a common story. They can be described by creating a narrative and a map. Your personal stories are powerful. Does your neighborhood share certain celebrations or traditions? Are there important places where your community gathers? What is the history of how your community came together? So I'm going to ask you to tell us those personal stories tonight while you're participating in this evening's workshop. While your comments will be recorded so commissioners and board members can hear them. I'll also encourage you to fill out the form that's on the website and to talk to us tonight. So I just thought it would be fun if we took a few minutes to think about your community and perhaps in real time to describe it. For the people in the room, we've got forms and maps that you can use to describe and draw your community of interest. For those of you participating on Zoom, I encourage you to fill out the form after the workshop. And here's a good thing: if you don't feel like using the map to map your community, no worries, our GIS team can do it for you. So be sure to mention streets or geography that form your boundaries. So please don't be shy, raise your hand if you're on Zoom to share the story of your community and why it's important to keep it together. And for those here, raise your hand as well. The commissioner and board members very much want to hear your stories this evening.
Thank you, Susan.
Well, I thought I'd get it started because oftentimes when this happens, people just like, So I thought I'd talk a little bit about my community of interest that I discovered when I moved. I moved from the beach area of the east side off of 26th Avenue on Fresno Street to Watsonville, the unincorporated area of Watsonville. And we found a house with a little lake in the back. It was called Drew Lake. And by golly, I found myself in a little community that was printed on the map and it said Interlochen. Well, Interlochen is a very old-fashioned word. Where did that come from? So as the more I sort of thought about, Little Drew Lake, well, on Cutter Drive, just above me, there's a very large lake. There's Pelly Lake. Down the Green Valley Road, there's Pinto Lake. Down going the other way towards Gistich, there's College Lake. And I think there's one more that I haven't found yet. Those lakes and the preservation of them is important 2 years ago, actually, I believe it was at the end of last summer, a little Drule got into trouble and had a big fish die off, which was pretty sticky. But mostly it was, well, is there something we could do to improve the health of our lake? So we called our supervisor, he came down, he took a look at it. We determined that in fact, the county did have some ownership interests in that lake. And so that's just one story of an important element that you might not think of, but you certainly want to be able to call your elected representative so that those lakes are preserved as much as practicable going forward. So maybe you all have stories that are something like that.
I think this is the time for us to ask any of our members of the public for their participation in sharing communities of interest. I'm going to ask, is there anyone else here who wants to speak about their community of interest here, or communities of interest? There could be more than one here in the community room. I don't have anyone here. Rita, do we have anyone online?
I'm going to try Vera again, but for other folks joining us online, if you do wish to speak, please use the raise hand feature. Vera, if you can go ahead and unmute.
There's 5 in the chat.
Any luck with that?
I seem to be on mute.
Vera says she does have comments, but she is unable to unmute.
Interesting. And can she write anything in the chat? Or I mean, the other tricky option is calling in, but that should be on the agenda link as well. So was Vera able to write anything in the chat? We don't have the chat visible here in the community room.
Oh, she just mentioned they don't have a microphone because they aren't able to join that way.
So her option would be to call in using the phone number.
Yeah.
Vera, the phone number, if you want to call in, is area code 669-900-9128.
We also have Janine on the line too, with her hand up.
Maybe we can do that, and if Vera's able to connect with us via the phone.
She'll need the conference ID too, right? Jane, or she probably has that, I guess.
I
Should
think
have
it might just be a conference line.
Oh, okay.
Why don't we try Janine? Why don't you unmute yourself, Janine? These Zooms are, it's not like being in person.
It's the same. Rita, with Janine, any luck in getting her able to connect with us?
No, and I don't think that I saw her hand up. She is an attendee.
I think
okay.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm wondering if Vera's able to do the call-in potentially. It should just show up as a number on the participant list. If she's able to call, I can say the number again.
Alyssa, we have a number of comments from the public. Is there a way that they can also connect with the commissioners via staff to ensure that their comments are received?
So one thing we can do is folks can reach out to us, to staff, and either to Rita or myself via email, or we can put our contact information. Our contact information is on the website currently. Do we want to show that website information so people could see the easiest way to connect with us via the web?
I would love,
Okay,
we've seen little snippets of the website, and Rita's prepared to do a brief tour of the website. And one of the things, of course, that's on the website is the county email that each commissioner has. So perhaps after taking comments, any other further comments,
yeah, why don't
we
we,
could do that as part of the item.
well, I think
following.
can we do that as part of this, since we're trying to figure out,
Yeah,
respond to how people can actually reach out to us if they're not successful this evening. So Rita, do you want to go ahead and bring up the website so we can show the public where to find us if they're not able to connect, either us or their commissioners, and we can go from there.
Well, I thought it was going to be effective. We've seen little snippets of the website, but there really is a wealth of information up there. Not only the way to get a hold of your district representative, but there's just an introductory conversation about what redistricting is. There's a place for the mapping and data. So Rita, if you could just go through the tabs, I think it would be just helpful, informative to people.
Yeah, do you want to guide them or do you want me to just guide them through the website?
Why don't you
Please
go
do
ahead,
it.
Rita?
Yes, that was my intention.
Okay. So when you get to the website, the first page is the home page. We always announce our next public meeting right up at the top. There's a little bit of information as you scroll down, but that's pretty much the gist of that first home page. The next tab, also available through the homepage is information on the Advisory Redistricting Commission, names. These are live links, so you can click on the link and get a hold of your commissioner for your district. We also have a nice way to be able to find your supervisorial district here. Let's see, our next tab is meetings and hearings. So this has all of our next meetings. Agendas will be posted here, recordings are posted here, and any supporting material is posted here. This is the communities of interest page where you can find information on communities of interest. You can also go into the form. The form can be downloaded as a PDF, or you can complete it just online by completing this section. And then here is where you can go in and map your community of interest. And Jenny walked us through that nicely. You can take a look at community of interest information that we've received here. Mapping and data. This is where we have our maps, census population numbers, and the mapping software will be available here as well. And in resources, we have county informational flyers, links to redistricting happening, districting process happening with the city of Santa Cruz and redistricting happening with the city of Watsonville. But you can sign up for more information here and include your email address and you'll get all of our information. If anyone needs to see this page in a different language, that's available up here. What did I miss, everyone? Did I miss anything from the website?
We do have through those live links, email connections to commissioners. Do we have a contact address on there for any of our staff? Because if you could just show that, so any of our members of the public who were not able to connect tonight, they would be able to work with us or the commissioners as needed.
Yes, so down at the bottom of every page is a contact us link, redistricting 2021 at santacruzcounty.us. Anything you send to this website goes to members of the staff, and this inbox is checked regularly.
Great. So we apologize, Vera and Janine, about us not being able to bring you in live in the meeting tonight, but please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We really do want your questions and your comments and your input. And with that, I think, Chair Watkins, I think, unless you guys are seeing any folks on Zoom for public comment on the communities of interest item, we probably, or if there's conversation that the commissioners want to share around communities of interest at this point, we probably can finish up with this item.
No, I would agree. Any commissioners you want to add in, speak to any items at all? Okay, hearing none, I guess we can move to reports and announcements. Item number 6.
Commissioner Watkins, we have our generic public comment as well. So any item, any matter relevant to the commission that has not been covered in our earlier items, if there's any public comment on that, this is the opportunity for that.
I saw that, but I sort of skipped over it for various reasons.
Absolutely.
And I don't see any hands raised for folks joining us online.
And here we are then, sir, at reports and announcements for commissioners or staff.
Great presentation.
Thank you. Around our room here, it looks like no announcements here on the staff side. Or Commissioner O'Neill, anything from you? She says she's demurring.
I'll make a motion for adjournment. Do you have a motion?
Well, thank you. Hold on a second. Oops, sorry.
Do you have a second? Who was the
Second.
Did you get that, staff?
Ruby, do we need a motion for adjournment?
Maybe we don't. Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay. All right, then. How about meeting adjourned then? Okay. Thank you, staff. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.